I met Tom 3 years ago, during a friend's birthday party. At the time, I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was just enjoying life, focusing on my career, and living in the moment. But then he walked in. He wasn't the type I usually went for. He was a bit on the quiet side, socially awkward, not really the life of the party type. But something about his easy smile and gentle nature caught my attention. He wasn't flashy, but he made me feel comfortable, like I could be myself without pretenses. We started talking that night. It wasn't one of those instant sparks, but there was something steady about him that I appreciated. He wasn't loud or overbearing. He listened when I spoke, and I realized he was different from the other guys I had dated. He wasn't pushy, but there was a certain warmth in his presence. We exchanged numbers, and from there, it felt like things just naturally progressed. Tom was an investment banker, a stable career with a decent income. He made enough money that he didn't have to worry about much, and he was generous with it, especially towards me. I was always amazed at how comfortable he made me feel financially. He would treat me to dinner, plan little getaways, and sometimes buy me things just because. It wasn't excessive, but it was enough to show that he cared. In the beginning, I thought it was a reflection of how he cared for me, that he wanted to make my life easier, take care of me in a way that felt both tender and protective. At first, it was all about the little moments. We would spend evenings at his apartment, cooking dinner together, watching movies, or just talking about life. He had this calm energy, a quiet reassurance that made me feel safe. I admired how stable he seemed, and how he always seemed to have his life in order. But deep down, I also started to feel something I couldn't quite place, a sense of being smothered, almost. I didn't recognize it at first because Tom wasn't demanding or controlling. He never pushed me to change. But there was something about the way he managed his world around him, and by extension, me, that started to feel a little too perfect. I began to notice the little things, the way he always paid for everything. At first, I thought it was sweet, but then it started to feel like an unspoken rule. He paid for meals, for weekends away, for groceries. I didn't have to worry about finances, and at first, I appreciated it. But then I realized how much it began to weigh on me. I didn't need his money, but I couldn't seem to get him to understand that. I never asked for anything, and yet he seemed to believe that taking care of me financially was the way to show love. I had my own career, a decent job in marketing that paid my bills, but Tom would insist on helping with everything, often even when I didn't need it. It was as if he couldn't let me do things on my own. I didn't want to sound ungrateful, but I started to feel like I was losing my own sense of independence. It wasn't just about money, it was about control. I started to realize that Tom was giving me everything except the one thing I truly needed, the space to stand on my own, without feeling like I owed him for everything. We never had serious arguments about it, but I started to feel suffocated. The comfort I once felt started to feel like a trap. Tom would do things for me without asking, as though I was incapable of making decisions for myself. And in some way, I began to resent him for it, even though I knew he wasn't trying to hurt me. But I wasn't sure how to express it without sounding ungrateful or selfish. At that point, I began to question what our relationship was truly based on. Was it love? Or was it convenience? I didn't know, but the more time I spent with him, the more I realized how much I was depending on him, not just for financial stability, but for my sense of worth. And that was the hardest realization of all. It was a quiet Tuesday night when everything changed. Tom had been in the shower for about 10 minutes, and I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone. I was in one of those moods where everything seemed funny, and I was chatting with my best friend, Emma, about relationships. We had been talking about the dynamics between couples, how some people stay together for reasons that aren't always about love, but security or convenience. And out of nowhere, the word slipped out of my mouth. He's a 4 but pays for everything. It was meant to be a joke, a playful comment about how sometimes people overlook flaws because of money or status. Emma laughed, and I continued on, not thinking twice about it. Tom had been in the shower, and I didn't even realize how loud I had been until I heard the water stop. He was right behind me. For a moment, I thought he hadn't heard me, that the joke was harmless, just a passing remark that would get lost in the noise of everyday life. But when I turned around, I saw him standing there, drenched, his expression unreadable. He didn't say a word at first, just stared at me. I felt my stomach drop. Something in his gaze made me realize that my words had landed differently than I thought. "Did you just say that?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, something sharp that I hadn't expected. I froze, not knowing how to respond. "Tom, are you serious?" His voice cracked slightly, but there was no anger in it, just hurt. Deep, raw hurt. It felt like a slap to the face. I had never seen him look at me like that before, like I had broken something inside of him. It was only then that I realized what I had done. The joke wasn't funny. It wasn't playful. It was cruel. And it was about him. I tried to laugh it off, brushing my hair behind my ear. "Come on, babe, I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking around." But Tom didn't laugh. He didn't even crack a smile. Instead, he stood there, his shoulders tense, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I've been nothing but good to you," he said, his voice low but firm. "I take care of you. I make sure you don't have to worry about anything. And this is what you think of me? I'm just some guy who's paying for everything?" My heart sank. The weight of my words started to hit me, harder than I could have ever anticipated. I hadn't thought about how my comment might make him feel. I hadn't considered that what I said might not just be a joke, it might be something that revealed a truth I didn't even know existed in me. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean it that way. I swear, it wasn't about you." But Tom didn't seem to hear me. His eyes were distant, staring out the window, like he was somewhere else, somewhere far from me. I tried to reach for him, but he pulled back, stepping away. The space between us felt like an ocean suddenly formed, cold and wide. "I don't think you understand what you've just done," he said, his words heavy with disappointment. "I can't keep doing this, Emily. I can't keep giving and giving when you don't see me. When you don't even care enough to understand how much this hurts." I wanted to explain, to tell him it wasn't true, that I did see him, that I appreciated everything he had done. But in that moment, I couldn't find the words. All I could do was stand there, feeling the distance between us grow with each passing second. The silence that followed Tom's words felt suffocating. He didn't shout, didn't raise his voice, but the coldness between us was so thick it was almost tangible. I stood there, unsure of what to do, as he turned and walked away, disappearing into the bedroom without another word. I sat on the couch, my heart racing. I wanted to run after him, to explain, to apologize, but something inside me held me back. It wasn't just guilt I was feeling. It was fear. Fear that I had shattered something irreparable, something that had seemed so solid and unshakable until this moment. For the next few hours, we didn't speak. I stayed in the living room, scrolling through my phone, pretending to be busy, but my mind was consumed by the weight of my words. Tom didn't return to the living room, and I knew he wasn't sleeping either. I could hear him pacing in the bedroom, his footsteps heavy, the sound of drawers opening and closing. He was thinking, processing, and I knew he was angry, hurt, too. And that scared me more than anything. Around midnight, I finally couldn't take it anymore. I went into the bedroom, nervously knocking on the door. He didn't answer. I hesitated before turning the handle and walking in. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, staring at the floor with his hands resting in his lap. "Tom," I said softly, my voice trembling. "Please, let me explain." He didn't look up at first. The room was dark except for the faint light from the street lamp outside, casting shadows on his face. When he finally met my eyes, there was something unreadable in his gaze. He looked like a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. "You really think I'm just a fool who pays for everything?" His voice was so quiet, almost like he didn't want to hear the answer. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I had no defense, no excuse for what I had said. How could I justify something so cruel? No, Tom, that's not what I meant. It was a stupid joke. I didn't, he cut me off, his tone sharper now. You didn't mean it? You didn't think before you said it? You didn't realize how that would sound? What kind of person does that make me? I felt a knot tighten in my chest. It was all true. I had been thoughtless, careless, and now I was paying for it. I'm sorry, I whispered, but it felt too small, too insignificant to make up for what I had done. Tom stood up suddenly, pacing back and forth across the room. You think I don't see it? That I don't know I'm just a paycheck to you? You think I'm blind to how you look at me sometimes? His words stung, each one like a slap to my face. I felt my stomach twist. That's not true, I pleaded. I don't see you like that, Tom. I love you. I didn't think before I spoke. I was trying to be funny, but it was wrong. It was a mistake. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression hardening. No, it's not just a mistake. It's who you are. And maybe that's what scares me the most. I'm not some guy to you, I'm not just someone who fills a role. I want more than that, Emily. I deserve more than that. I swallowed hard, feeling the tears well up in my eyes. I had never seen him like this, so vulnerable, so hurt. I had always known he had his own insecurities, but I had never realized how deep they ran. He wasn't just upset with me, he was questioning everything between us. And deep down, I knew I had broken something inside him that I couldn't fix with just an apology. Tom walked past me, heading toward the door. I need some space, he said, his voice shaking. I can't do this right now. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me standing in the empty room, alone with the wreckage of my careless words. The days after that night felt like an endless blur. I woke up each morning, dreading the silence that hung between us, the tension thick in the air. Tom didn't speak to me unless it was absolutely necessary. His eyes were distant, always avoiding mine, and I couldn't blame him. What I had said to him was unforgivable. I had crushed him with my careless joke, and now he was pulling away, building walls that I couldn't tear down. I tried to be patient, to give him space as he had asked, but the distance between us was suffocating. Every time I tried to talk to him, to apologize again, it only made things worse. He would nod, say it was fine, but his tone was empty, devoid of the warmth that once filled our conversations. It was like I was living with a stranger, someone who had once cared for me but now couldn't even look at me without a flicker of pain in his eyes. I tried to distract myself with work, with errands, with anything that would keep my mind occupied. But nothing worked. My thoughts kept drifting back to that night, to the way Tom had looked at me with so much hurt, and I couldn't stop thinking about how I had broken him. My chest felt tight all the time, and I found it hard to breathe. I couldn't focus on anything. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his disappointment. I had never realized how much he meant to me until I saw how easily I could lose him. On the third day of our silence, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I made dinner. Tom used to love when I cooked, he said it was one of the little things that made him feel loved. I thought that maybe, if I tried to bring back some normalcy, he would see that I was trying, that I wasn't giving up on us. I spent hours in the kitchen, trying to make everything perfect, trying to fix the mess I had made. When Tom came home, I had set the table, lit a few candles, and poured 2 glasses of wine. He walked in, glanced at the table, and then at me. For a moment, I thought I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of hope, perhaps, but then it was gone. His expression remained neutral, distant. I made your favorite, I said, forcing a smile. I thought we could talk over dinner. He nodded but didn't sit down. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, looking at the floor. Emily, I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what you expect me to say. I felt my heart sink again. It was as though no matter what I did, nothing would change. I just want things to go back to how they were, I whispered, my voice breaking. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry, Tom. I am so sorry. He was quiet for a long time, and I thought for a moment that he might walk away again. But then he spoke, his voice low and tired. I don't know if we can go back, Emily. I don't know if I can forgive you. Those words hit me harder than anything he had said before. I had always believed that love could fix things, that if you were truly sorry, the other person would eventually come around. But now, with him standing there, so broken, so distant, I realized that maybe love wasn't enough. Maybe some things couldn't be undone. I stood there, staring at the table I had set, the meal that would go cold, and the wine that would remain untouched. The reality of what I had done was beginning to settle in. I had ruined something precious, and I didn't know how to fix it. It had been a week since that night. A week of silence, of awkward glances and conversations that felt more like distant exchanges between strangers than a couple who had once been so close. Tom was still distant, still angry, and despite my attempts to reach out, it felt like the gap between us was only widening. I had spent days thinking, reflecting, trying to figure out what I could do to make things right. But the more I thought, the more I realized that I couldn't undo the damage I had done with a simple apology or a well-cooked dinner. What I needed was to show him that I truly understood the weight of my words and the pain I had caused. But how? What could I do that would truly prove to him that I wasn't the person he saw me as in that moment? One evening, after a particularly quiet day, Tom came home later than usual. I could hear him moving around in the other room, but instead of retreating into myself like I usually did, I decided to act. I had something to say, something important. I waited until I heard his footsteps approaching the living room, then I stood up. He looked at me, his eyes weary, as if he expected me to say something trivial, something meaningless like the countless times I had tried to apologize before. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Tom, I said, my voice steady, but full of emotion. I don't expect everything to go back to the way it was. But I need you to understand something. Tom raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything, just watching me with a guarded expression. I didn't realize how much you meant to me until I almost lost you, I continued. I always thought that everything would work out, that we would always be okay, no matter what. But I was wrong. I took you for granted. I used to think love was enough, but now I see that it's not just about love, it's about respect. It's about knowing that words matter, that they have the power to hurt or heal. And I never thought about how my words affected you. Tom stood there, silent, his arms crossed. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between wanting to believe me and the pain of what I had said. My heart was racing, but I had to say this, had to make him see that I wasn't the same person who had made that careless joke. I was wrong, Tom, I whispered, my voice shaking now. I want to prove to you that I'm not that person anymore. That I've learned, that I've changed. I don't want to lose you. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought he wasn't going to respond at all. But then, to my surprise, he slowly uncrossed his arms and took a step toward me. You really mean that? His voice was low, almost hesitant, as if he wasn't sure if he could believe me. You're not just saying this because you feel guilty? I shook my head, my eyes locked on his. No, I'm saying this because I love you. And I want to build something better with you. Something that's based on trust, and honesty, and respect. Tom looked at me for a long moment, his eyes softening. And then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, he said, I want that too. In that moment, I felt the weight of the past week lift off my shoulders. The air between us didn't feel so heavy anymore. There was still a lot of work to be done, and I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I could see a glimpse of hope in his eyes. Maybe we could rebuild what we had lost. Maybe we could start again. And as I stood there, with Tom looking at me in a way I hadn't seen in days, I realized that redemption wasn't about making everything perfect, it was about being willing to try, to grow, and to never stop working for the love that had always been worth fighting for.